I'll never forget the moment my own brother looked his boss in the eye and called me worthless. It happened at his engagement celebration, this gorgeous venue tucked into the mountains just outside the city. Snow was coming down outside these floor-to-ceiling windows, and inside, everyone was dressed to impress. Champagne glasses everywhere, laughter echoing off the wood beams. I'd been standing near the back, trying to stay invisible like I usually did at family events, when Parker spotted me. He had this look on his face, this grin that made my stomach drop before he even opened his mouth. He waved me over, loud enough that people turned to look, and then he put his arm around my shoulder like we were the best of friends and said to the man standing next to him, "This is my sister, Lauren, the one who never quite figured life out." His boss didn't smile. He was older, maybe late 50s, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably costs more than my car payment. He just stood there, looking at Parker, then at me, then back at Parker. My mother laughed nervously from somewhere behind me. My father said something I couldn't quite hear, but the tone was agreement. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. I felt heat crawl up my neck, my hands going numb. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat closed up. Parker kept talking, making some joke I didn't register. His boss said nothing, just nodded once, very slowly, and told Parker they'd talk soon. I left 20 minutes later, said I wasn't feeling well, and drove home with my vision blurring the whole way. If you've ever been the one your family pretends doesn't exist, stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. That night, I sat in my kitchen until almost dawn. I kept replaying it. The way Parker's voice sounded so casual, like humiliating me was just small talk. The way my parents didn't defend me, the way no one did. I was 43 years old. I ran my own consulting business, helped struggling companies stay afloat, renegotiated debt, restructured operations. It wasn't flashy work, nobody posted about it on social media, but I was good at it, really good. My clients paid me because I saved them from bankruptcy, from lawsuits, from collapse. I worked out of a small office downtown, kept my overhead low, and built a reputation on being reliable and discreet. None of that mattered to my family. To them, success meant titles and corner offices and LinkedIn posts. Parker had all of that. He worked in operations for a big logistics firm, always talking about deals and meetings and his team. My parents treated him like he'd invented fire. Every time he got a raise, my mother would call everyone she knew. When he bought a new watch, my father would show people photos. I could have cured a disease, and they would have asked when I was going to settle down and get a real job. 3 months before that engagement party, Parker called me. Sounded stressed, said he and his fiancée, Monica, were planning this big event, and he was swamped, asked if I could help with a few vendor things. I should have said no. I should have remembered every other time I'd helped him and gotten nothing but silence in return. But he's my brother, so I said yes. It started simple. He sent me a few contracts to review, catering quotes, that kind of thing. Then I saw the problems. One contract he'd already signed had a clause that could have bankrupted him if anything went wrong with delivery schedules, the kind of thing that gets lawyers involved. I spent 3 nights on the phone with that vendor, got the language changed, locked in better terms. Parker never asked what I did, just said thanks and moved on. Then the deposits. 2 weeks out, the photographer and the band both sent final notices. Parker had forgotten to pay them. If they walked, the whole party would fall apart. No pictures, no music. The venue had a no refund policy if vendors canceled. I didn't even think about it. I just wired the money. $7,500 for the photographer, another $6,000 for the band. I pulled it from a client account I was managing, told myself I'd move it back later. Parker said he'd pay me back immediately. He never did. I kept working, caught inflated pricing from the florist, negotiated down the bar service by almost a quarter, fixed a scheduling conflict that would have left them without waitstaff. Every single piece of that event I touched, and Parker had no idea how close it all came to disaster. To him, everything just worked. He walked into that lodge, accepted compliments on how perfect it all was, and never mentioned my name once. Until he did, in front of everyone, to call me a failure. I stared at my coffee that morning after, cold and untouched, and realized something I should have known years ago. I'd spent my entire adult life trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided I didn't deserve one. The following Tuesday, a black car pulled up outside my office. I looked out the window and saw him, Parker's boss, the man from the party. He walked in without calling first, without knocking, just opened the door and asked if I had a few minutes. I didn't know what else to do, so I said yes. His name was Richard Calloway. He sat down across from me, didn't waste time with pleasantries. He said when Parker introduced me that night and said my name, something clicked. He'd heard it before. Took him the whole drive home to remember where. 15 years ago, he said, he owned a mid-sized freight company. They'd overextended, taken bad loans, signed contracts that were bleeding them dry. Bankruptcy was weeks away. He was going to lose everything his father had built. Then a consultant reached out. Young, no reputation, no referrals. She offered to review their books for free. Spent weeks going through everything, found every place they were losing money, put together a plan to restructure without massive layoffs. She didn't charge him a cent. When he tried to pay her after things started turning around, she refused, said she was just starting out and couldn't take money from someone in crisis. She slid an old report across the table. My name was on the cover. Same format I still used, same clean layout. He'd kept it all these years. I remembered that project. It was one of my first after going independent. I was 28, desperate to prove I could do this work, willing to do anything to build a name. I worked nights and weekends, called suppliers, drafted letters to banks. I'd forgotten about it years ago, just another case in a long line of them. Richard said that company became the foundation of everything he built after, sold it a few years later for a significant profit, invested carefully, grew into the operation he ran now. All of it traced back to that unpaid work from a stranger who saw potential where he only saw collapse. He looked at me and said hearing my family describe me the way they did, seeing the woman who saved his business treated like she didn't matter, didn't sit right, especially because Parker reported directly to him, and he'd been noticing things. He didn't elaborate then, just asked about my current work. We talked for over an hour. He asked smart questions, understood the industry, respected what I did. When he left, he shook my hand and said he'd like to stay in touch, properly this time. Over the next few days, he called a few more times. Then he asked to meet again. That's when he told me the real reason he'd come. His company had been running an internal audit for almost a year, quiet, thorough, looking into financial irregularities across departments. Parker's name came up early. He laid it out carefully, showed me documents, emails, reports. There was a major contract with a retail chain, logistics optimization, high profile. Parker had taken full credit, got a bonus, got promoted, but the actual work had been done by a junior analyst named Chris Tomlinson. Chris had spent 6 months building models, researching routes, drafting proposals. Parker joined in the final weeks, then systematically erased Chris from the narrative, forwarded emails with slight changes, presented ideas as his own. The commission alone was $40,000. Then the expenses. Parker had been billing personal costs to the company for over a year. Weekend trips labeled as client meetings, hotel stays marked as conferences, even some of his engagement party expenses, venue tours, catering tastings, submitted as business development. The total fraud was somewhere north of $100,000. Richard's forensic team had cross-checked everything, credit cards, calendars, travel logs. It was all there, undeniable. I sat there listening, feeling something cold settle in my chest. Not surprise exactly, more like confirmation. Parker had always cut corners when he thought he could get away with it. Seeing it documented just made it impossible to ignore. Richard said he needed someone he could trust for the next phase. They were acquiring two smaller companies, restructuring, integrating systems, needed an independent consultant to handle the financial side, someone who prioritized accuracy over politics. He offered me a contract, 6 months, $250,000. I took a few days to think about it, ran projections, figured out logistics, weighed it against my existing clients. The money was more than I usually made in a year, but more than that, it was validation. Someone who actually understood my work wanted me for a major project. Before I signed, Richard mentioned one more thing. During the audit, his team found some unusual transfers, money moving through accounts connected to family members. He didn't have details yet, wasn't ready to make accusations, but thought I should know there might be more to the story. I signed the contract the next day. A few weeks later, Parker called, asked to meet. His voice was shaking. We met at a coffee shop. He looked terrible, shirt wrinkled, eyes red, hands trembling when he tried to drink water. He didn't mention Monica, just launched into it, said the investigation was closing in, expenses, the contract, the credit. Said he needed me to back him up, tell them we'd collaborated, that he'd consulted me on strategy. Family helps family, he said, always has. I told him no, I wasn't going to lie. He got angry then, said I owed him, that our parents had always counted on him, that I couldn't just stand by and let everything fall apart. I stood up to leave. He followed me to the door, voice dropping low, said I should think about what this would do to the family. After that, the call started, late at night, early morning, blocked numbers, voicemails that started apologetic and turned vicious. Texts in bursts reminding me of favors, holidays, things I'd done, framing them like debts he was collecting. Then someone created a fake email address, almost identical to mine, one letter different in the domain, started sending messages internally at his company, detailed advice on how to shift personal expenses to business accounts, how to reassign credit in performance reviews, dated to look like ongoing consultation, positioning me as complicit. I found them during a routine file review for my project. The timestamps were clustered, all created in one evening, the IP logs traced directly to Parker's work computer. I documented everything, screenshots, metadata, access records, sent it all to Richard's compliance team. The hearing happened a week later. I watched from an observation room, one-way glass. Parker walked in looking composed, notes in hand, suit pressed. The panel included Richard, the CFO, HR, legal counsel. They went through it methodically, receipts, timelines, the forged emails. Parker tried explanations first, pressure, deadlines, misunderstandings. When that didn't work, he tried emotion, stress from wedding planning, family expectations, his voice cracking. The panel didn't move. HR delivered the decision: immediate termination for gross misconduct, civil recovery of all misappropriated funds, criminal referral to authorities. Security walked him out. He passed right by the glass. Didn't know I was there. His face was blank. I drove home slowly. No rush of victory, no satisfaction, just a deep, cold relief, like finally setting down something I'd been carrying too long. 2 months later, an invitation came from my aunt, my mother's older sister. Handwritten, formal. Dinner at her house, entire family invited. She'd always been quiet, observant, widowed young, lived independently. I almost didn't go, but she added a personal note at the bottom. It's time we talked openly. Please come. The house was full when I arrived. My parents' car, Parker's SUV, my cousins and their spouses. Inside, the table was set for 10. Candles lit, the smell of roast filling the air. Aunt Catherine greeted me at the door, hugged me tight. Her eyes were sharp. Dinner started with small talk, weather, holidays, safe topics. Aunt Catherine waited until everyone had food, then stood at the head of the table. She said she'd stayed silent too long, that this family had treated me like I didn't exist for years, and she was done watching it happen. My father tried to interrupt. She raised her hand, told him to listen. Then she started listing things. 8 years ago, when she was diagnosed with cancer, treatment costs exceeded her insurance. She was going to lose her house. I'd paid the remaining bills, over $40,000, sent it through the hospital foundation so she wouldn't know who. She only found out when a thank you letter arrived with my name. My mother's fork stopped midair. When my cousin David lost his job during the recession, needed capital to start his contracting business, who gave him an interest-free loan? $22,000, repaid slowly, no pressure. David nodded, looking down. And when my cousin Emma's husband was facing eviction after his startup failed, who covered their rent for 6 months? Quietly, no announcements. The room went silent. But the worst, Aunt Catherine said, voice tight, was the education fund. My grandfather had set aside money for each grandchild, $50,000 for me, designated for college and early career. My parents withdrew it all, redirected it to Parker's accounts, private university tuition, first apartment. My father's face went red. He started to say the money went where it did the most good. Aunt Catherine cut him off, said they decided I had no potential, so they took what was mine. My mother's voice was barely a whisper, said they thought I'd manage on my own, that Parker needed the help to succeed. Parker spoke up, defensive, said times were tough, everyone made sacrifices, I turned out fine anyway. Aunt Catherine looked at him, said fine, while he used my inheritance to build the life he flaunted. And now, after everything at work, he still sat there acting entitled? No one responded. She sat down. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. My father tried to speak, stopped. My mother dabbed her eyes. Parker pushed food around his plate. I didn't say anything. I'd known about the fund for a while, but hearing it spoken aloud in front of everyone shifted something deep inside. People left soon after dessert. Quiet goodbyes, no lingering. Aunt Catherine walked me to my car, said she had to say it, for me and for the truth. I hugged her, thanked her, and drove home with her words echoing in my head. 1 year later, I changed my number, updated all my professional contacts, set email filters to block anything from family addresses. Letters went unanswered, social media connections severed. No explanations, no goodbyes, just silence. The restructuring project finished ahead of schedule. The integration ran smoother than projected, more profitable, fully compliant. Richard offered me an extension, ongoing advisory role with equity options. I accepted. My firm grew. New clients came through his network. I moved into a larger office, hired 2 associates, started taking pro bono cases for small businesses in crisis, the way I'd started. The work felt purposeful, unburdened. Word filtered back about the others. Parker and Monica separated, then divorced. Legal recovery from the company drained his savings. Civil judgments piled on with interest. Job applications went nowhere. Background checks revealed the fraud termination. He took contract work when he could, low-paying, unstable. My parents stayed in the same house, quieter now. Holidays passed without gatherings. Occasional updates from mutual acquaintances mentioned regretful conversations, attempts to reach out through cousins, messages I never received a second time. They aged faster in photos I didn't look for. My father retired early, health complaints increasing. My mother volunteered more, filling empty hours. Neither found a way back because I no longer left the door open. I didn't track their struggles closely, no satisfaction in knowing the consequences, just the steady knowledge that my boundaries held. Some evenings, driving through the city, I thought about all those years spent proving my worth to people who refused to see it. The energy I'd poured into fixing things for others now fueled my own path. Cutting ties wasn't cruelty. It was the only way to protect what I'd built and keep moving forward without carrying their weight anymore. True respect, I learned, can't be earned from people determined to not give it. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is walk away and let them live with the choices they made.